Let's talk about some Jane Austen novels I read recently. Hi guys, welcome back to the channel. Now, if you guys are new to my channel, my name is Lisa and I'm actually a romance reader here on booktube as well as a young adult reader. I have this ongoing series where I do the romance reader tries different genres, and last year I tried out many different genres such as thrillers, general fiction, young adult, middle grade, and paranormal, and I absolutely fell in love with all these genres so much that I will continue doing it this year. And so far this year I tried out one genre, which is classics, and I already uploaded a video where I try out a bunch of classics called Romance Reader Tries Different Classics. And so far I've read a lot more classics and I actually want to talk more about them. Now, with that being said, I want to give like a preface that I am not a English major, and now that these books that I'm reading, they're purely for enjoyment purposes. They're purely for me reading it and experiencing the words that the authors have written, and it's just me trying to just dive deeper into books that I haven't read in the past, and also reading books that were printed a very long time ago, and me just trying to enjoy that experience. So my videos are not going to be very deep analysis of the characters or deep analysis of the plot lines. So if you guys are a high school student, if you guys are a university student looking for more information to add towards your book report or to add towards your presentations and projects, I clearly advise you to click out of this video and go to maybe like a different video that talks about this book, because like I have nothing really much intelligent to say aside from the fact that I'm giving you the raw, honest truth of someone who's not a classic reader trying out this book and seeing if they would like it, as opposed to really diving deep into everything the book has to offer. So for this video, I'm going to be reviewing the 3 Jane Austen novels that I've read recently that I really enjoyed and that I feel like that you should pick up too if you haven't read Jane Austen and you just want to read it for fun, simply because she's one of the authors that you want to cross off your list before you die. So let's get started. So I showed this book off in my classics haul video. So if that has been edited and uploaded correctly, you'll see that one first. But let me show you my edition again. This is my only Jane Austen kind of like edition that I have that I really do like. I actually lied to you about it because now I just remembered that I have this really pretty edition coming in the mail very soon. So I'll upload it and show you guys, but I'm just going to hold up this like chunker and show you guys that this is what I have. This book actually includes 6 books of Jane Austen's. It's all her novels, and I've read Sense and Sensibility, Pride and Prejudice, and also Persuasion. So the first novel that I read from Jane Austen is none other than the very popular Pride and Prejudice by Jane Austen. Now, I always wanted to read Pride and Prejudice, but I just never did, mostly because there's so many adaptations of Pride and Prejudice, and there's so many people just kind of like using the same storyline and changing it here and there, that I just felt like it wasn't really worth my time anymore, because I knew the story. I knew how the characters played out. I knew how to go along. I knew what was going to happen. So really, did I really need to read the classic anymore if I read so many adaptations afterwards and I already knew the general plot line? So anytime that I would try to read Pride and Prejudice, I would just get bored and I would just click out of the book, and then I'll just be like, I don't need to. I'll just rewatch Bridget Jones' Diaries, or I'll go watch another like teen movie out there where 2 characters hate each other because of their economic class differences. But I finally read Pride and Prejudice, and I must say that I need to go back in time to the times where I went, I don't need to read Pride and Prejudice because I watched the movie adaptation, and punched myself in the face, because you can't hold a candle to the original works. Like, the original works is what makes those adaptations work. Jane Austen was a genius with words, in the fact that her dialogue was so much wittier than I expected it to be. It was so funny. It was so sarcastic. It was filled with 2 characters that were really pitted against each other because of their own like preconceived opinions of each other, and also because like the differences in like where they grew up and what their own personal motives are in life and things like that. So it was just really great, and it's really juicy. So if you guys don't really know the plot of Pride and Prejudice, it's basically about these 2 characters who hate each other because of their own like differences, and then they think of each other as the worst type of person ever, but then they're always constantly being thrown into situations where they have to be polite with each other but also like hate each other in the background. And then her family actually ends up getting into trouble, and then it's about him kind of like coming in and helping and saving the day, and then her learning that, you know, he's not that bad of a guy, and then he learns that, you know, she's not that bad of a girl, and it's like their kind of romance. And it's very fun. It's very action filled. Like, I never thought that it would be so much action in it. And it was also filled with a lot of characters that you either really loved or you really hated. Like me personally, I could not care for Lydia, who is Elizabeth Bennet, who is our main character's little sister. I thought she was really annoying and I did not care for her. And then there's also characters that are straight up really like jerks, and you'll hate them too. So that's why I would recommend you to read Pride and Prejudice if you haven't read already. So the next book that I read is actually Persuasion, and now this one I wanted to read really badly, mostly because my friend really liked this book, and I was just like, okay, like I'll like dive into it because, you know, you really like it, so there has to be something good about it. So this one tells the story of basically a girl who falls in love with a guy, but then the guy doesn't come from like a wealthy economic status, and she allows people to persuade her to not marry him because of their nasty opinions of him. And then she thinks that, you know, it's true, I shouldn't marry someone of lower status, I shouldn't marry someone who's poorer than me, like, you know, like there's really nothing much to it if I marry you. So she ends up breaking his heart, and he kind of leaves the country and he becomes a wealthy, like kind of like a businessman kind of thing. And then he comes back and he is being praised by a lot of people because now he kind of risen in the ranks. And then now she, on the other hand, is kind of left destitute because of her father's spending habits. And now she is kind of like on the opposite ends, and now she doesn't really have any marriage prospects. So now this is kind of the story of her yearning for her old lover and thinking that he doesn't love her anymore, while he seems like that he's super bitter about this girl who broke his heart and who basically said that he wasn't good enough for her. And now he's just really happy to see her kind of like feel the effect of prejudice and feel the effect of like being poor and things like that. This one was really good in the sense that there was a lot of tension between these two characters. Like, it absolutely broke my heart that our main female character would see him be happy in like different social situations, and then him brushing off and being cold and not ignoring her and things like that. And then you could really feel the emotions kind of pour out from Jane Austen's like descriptions and sentences. So I felt really bad for her because obviously it's her fault for being persuaded by other people's opinions, but then also at the same time, like, she was kind of stuck in a tricky situation because she is a female, and back in the day she doesn't have that many rights, and like her own, really, like, she has to look out for herself. And really what she has to look out for herself is that she has to marry for money, and she has to make sure that her future is locked down and settled. Like, she can't put a gamble on her life because she could put her life in jeopardy and also her family's life in jeopardy. But I also knew that these two people wanted to marry for love, but they also knew that these differences could be their demise. And that's why I really enjoyed it. And also, like, I was posting about this book on my Instagram stories. So if you guys haven't followed me yet, definitely go follow me on Instagram because I'm more active on there anyways. And I was telling people that I was reading Persuasion, and I know this book has been out for like hundreds of years. It's like something that, like, you know, there shouldn't be that many spoilers out there for, but my followers and also my friends were telling me, yeah, you gotta like read the last couple of chapters. Those are like the best chapters. And I'm not trying to ruin it for you, but like, I was like anticipating now for like that like one pivotal moment. And I was just like, guys, you ruined the experience for me because I never knew that this was going to happen. But then now you guys are telling me to pay more attention to it. And then now I just kind of like, I was just kind of waiting for it to happen. And it was enjoyable. It was still good, but I felt like I would have enjoyed it more if I didn't know it was going to happen. So now it's just like, thank you, I guess. So this one, I didn't give ratings yet, but Pride and Prejudice, I think I gave it a 5 out of 5 stars. I really enjoyed it. And then Persuasion, I think I may have given it a 4 out of 5 stars, mostly because like halfway in the middle, it kind of carried on with like a different plot. All of Jane Austen novels have like this thing where like there's a lot of characters involved, and then there's a lot of like different plot lines moving at the same time, and they kind of like all bleed and intertwine with each other, which makes it really more interesting. But this one, I just kind of like pulled out more, and I wasn't able to dive into it as deeply as Pride and Prejudice. Also, I have like a thing with Persuasion because a lot of the characters are actually named somewhat similar names, so it kind of got really confusing. So another tip to reading classics is to really just have the character map out there so that you know who the characters are and what their purpose in the story is, because or else you're just going to get really confused by the names. So the last book that I read from Jane Austen is actually Sense and Sensibility, and now this one, I knew it was about two sisters, but I didn't know like a real like plot line of this book is, but it's basically about two sisters who are the opposites of each other. One is like kind of like represents sense, and then the other one represents sensibility. And you know, I didn't really know the difference between these two words until I googled it, and then I was like, oh, okay, this makes sense now. So you know, you can pause this video and Google the differences between sense and sensibility. But basically, these two sisters are opposites of each other, and they find themselves kind of like always arguing because they kind of have different stances in life. One really likes to be proper, and the other one really likes to have their emotions kind of take over their choices in life. And it's about these two sisters who fall in love with the wrong guy. They end up having their hearts broken by these rogues, by these jerks who kind of come here and make these like claims that they, you know, they are their soulmates and that they will love them forever, but then leave them and then have them heartbroken. So it's about these two sisters getting over their heartbreak and learning more about each other's differences and learning more about each other's like different coping mechanisms to heartbreaks, and also like another storyline that kind of unfolds within this book. Now, I really liked it because I never thought that Jane would kind of spend a lot of time developing these relationships. I thought that she would just kind of like jump into it and then tell us that like they broke their hearts and then that's how the story begins. Because sometimes with classic novels, what I find is that they don't really like to dive too deeply into some scenes. Like some scenes just kind of happen and then you're just like, oh shit, like that happened, and then that's it. But then in today, like an author spends like 30 pages or like a whole chapter on this one pivotal scene to really build up the angst and to build up the tension. But with classic novels, I feel like some scenes they drag on for a long time, but then other scenes that are filled with action, filled with accidents, filled with characters kind of like realizing things, they spend like 3 sentences on it. So I thought that Jane Austen was going to pull one of those moves where she's going to spend like a sentence on it and tell me that their hearts are broken, and then this is the story how it begins of these two sisters learning more about each other. But she didn't. She actually spent like a good chunk of the book, like probably around 30% of this book, talking about these two sisters actually falling in love with these two guys, making the readers fall in love with the guys, and then making them think that these two characters are going to find love and find happily ever after, and then having you be emotionally attached to these characters and then ripping them away because they're jerks. So it really was interesting, this fact, and that's why I really liked this book in the beginning, but then somewhere towards the end I just kind of like lost this messaging and I just didn't really like care anymore. And that's why Sense and Sensibility it's still a very enjoyable book and I still really enjoyed it. But the thing is, I only gave it a 3 out of 5 stars, mostly because the beginning was really good, but then in the end, like it kind of fell flat and it wasn't as good and, you know, tension filled and spicy as like Persuasion or Pride and Prejudice. Another thing that I really wanted to talk about with Jane Austen novels, and it's because like the one thing that I really like about Jane Austen novels, and it's like me clearly romanticizing Jane Austen and romanticizing classics, but like I just like to think about going into the past and picking up Pride and Prejudice hot off the press, and like nobody has read it before, and like everybody's like not used to this story, not used to Jane Austen stories, not used to Persuasion, not used to Sense and Sensibility, but them being like kind of like addicted to the words and like reading like the hot gossip and the hot juice between these characters, and like people just experiencing it for the first time. And I think that's really interesting because nowadays, like when we do that and we read the books we get really excited for, it's like kind of like a plot line that we've seen before in many books. But then after like in Jane Austen's time, this was kind of like the first time them seeing that kind of plot line. So I don't know, I just really like thinking about that, and I really like thinking about how like people back in the olden days were just kind of probably blown away by like how beautiful it was and like how talented Jane was, because she created these storylines that a lot of modern authors today actually take inspiration from her from. So I don't know, I just like to think about that, and that's like kind of like my concluding thoughts of reading classics and why I sometimes really pull myself out of the classics to realize that this is like the original text that a lot of people experience for the first time ever on this planet. So that is that with my whole like 2 a.m. like mental breakdown spew of classics, and hopefully you guys enjoyed this video. Hopefully you guys learned a little bit more about classics. Hopefully like I, you know, motivated you guys to try to read classics, or like, you know, really pepped you guys into reading them. Pick up classics soon because they're great, and I can't wait to kind of make myself join into the classes community on booktube so that I can be one of the members and talk to you guys about books. But until next time, I'll see you guys again with more content that everybody will enjoy. Bye.